Hello, everyone. Welcome in to another episode of the Payne and Drain show following another Lions win, this time to clinch the NFC North and the NFC's number one seed. I'm your host, Zach Payne. With me, as always, is my co-host, Alex Drain. And Alex, how are we feeling after the Lions put the cherry on top to the greatest regular season in franchise history?
Pretty good. That was a quite a game. Bit of a odd first half, and then it gave way to really strong second half, and it was impossible to have anything but very good vibes coming out of it.
Yeah. I don't even know how you really encapsulate the feeling of this game without just saying the vibes are great right now because the Lions, they have time to now rest up ahead of the divisional round. The Vikings have to play in that god awful Monday night wild card game. I don't know who made that thing, but it is really stupid. So I feel bad for the Vikings and Rams on that front, but we'll get into all the wild card matchups later in the show because this is officially now a playoff episode of the show. So we got to break it all down. Now, of course, before we get into everything, make sure you follow the show on Twitter. You can find us at Payne and Drain. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. And as always, we like to start things on the offensive side of the ball, but this was a weird game. I'm tempted to do the first half, second half split again, like we did earlier in the season with an episode, but just started with the first half on offense. It was not great. It wasn't pretty. And Jared Goff he had some great throws. He had some not so great throws. The offensive line was allowing a lot of pressure. The run game couldn't get anything going. What were the Vikings doing well in the first half that they weren't doing in week 7 when the teams first played, and in the second half, obviously, when the dam broke?
Well, there was a few things going on in that first half. Part of the story of this game on offense is you had a lot of weird field position, setting drives up in a certain way. So the Lions, in the first half, they start normal field position because they get the ball first. That first drive, I don't really know if there was anything particularly unusual about that. The Lions tried to get a little cute with the run on that second series, and it didn't quite end up working. We can get into that later. Second drive, normal field position. They drive down and score. Third drive, again, normal field position, but the offensive line has an issue. I don't think that drive was different than the first game because you remember the start of the first game, the Vikings really overwhelmed the Lions in the trenches. But then after that, the Lions have a drive that starts right in their own goal line. They have to kind of dig out of it from there. They have another drive that works well, then it unravels on a 4th and 1 situation. So it just, I don't know, there wasn't anything particularly common about any of those sequences. The Vikings just made some good plays and were able to get off the field and take advantage of field position on one occasion. But then in the second half, the Lions were just able to slice them open and get some explosives that they weren't quite able to get in the first half, particularly on the ground. And that was definitely one of the stories.
Yeah, and look, early on, the Vikings did a good job. It really seemed like they were trying to stack the box a lot more to stop the run in the first half, whereas in the second half, it seemed like it opened up a little bit more, just a bit. The Lions were. A lot of the problems on the first few drives just came down to the Lions asking Sam Laporta to block defensive linemen, which I love Sam Laporta. Not really gonna shine in those areas, especially when Van Ginkel was also all over the ball early on. Jonathan, is it Grenard? Is that how you pronounce that name?
I believe it is Grenard, yeah.
He was great as a pass rusher. He had a few really nice moments against the run. Like the Vikings defensive lineman, Van Ginkel's kind of that hybrid edge outside linebacker, but like their defensive line, their front seven did a really good job at overwhelming the Lions' offensive line throughout the game, honestly, but especially in the first half. And it resulted in pressure, okay, like on a decent amount of snaps. They obviously blitz a lot. Grenard got the best of Taylor Decker numerous times in this game. Van Ginkel was just too quick for Sewell on a few occasions, one of which was one of the biggest hits I've seen a Lion take in a while. on a failed little screen pass, which is another thing we're going to have to talk about is the amount of screen passes in this game. But early on, the first real big play was actually before the first Gibbs touchdown run. It was a Jared Goff 4th and 5 throw to Jamison Williams with a free rusher in his face. And that this is kind of the good and bad about Goff in the first half is he had a couple of really bad mistakes, but he also made throws like this where he just stands in, takes a hit, delivers a good pass, and keeps the drive going. So let's focus on Goff for a second. What did Goff show you throughout this game? Because it was kind of a whole game thing that was both positive and concerning.
Well, that play in particular was a great play. There was really, I think, his two best throws were that one and then the fourth down to Gibbs for a touchdown. Both situations where he's got free rushers, has to stand in and fit a ball into a fairly tight window from a kind of vulnerable position. Really, this game is what we've seen from Goff a lot of this season, which is that he is really able to keep his ratio of positive events to negative events, even in games that are overall not as strong like this game. When I went through and looked at all the throws, I came away with the same usual ratio of positive events to negative events, which is a sharply positive ratio. The only thing that really changes, whether it's a great Goff game or not as good like this one, is how negative the negative events are, right? So I had him down for only 7 negative events, but in those 7 negative events, you have 2 turnovers, one of which really bad that gifts the Vikings a very short field. And it also has a batted ball on a fourth down, which is essentially a turnover as well. So when 3 of your 7 negative events are turnovers, then that's going to really drag down the whole picture. But again, Goff's overall ratio was very good, as it's been all season. So it just kind of cleaning up that little stuff. But he made a lot of good throws otherwise, and the overall results are perfectly acceptable to me.
So, just for everyone listening, what do you qualify as a negative event? Like, obviously, you encapsulate turnovers and batted balls into that, but what is the bar for a negative event for you?
Yeah, so I use the same charting that I do at MGoBlog for the categories. So you have the positive events are dead on balls, which is like NFL throws, catchable, which is routine throws that are delivered, and then scrambles for positive yardage. Those are positive. Then marginal throws, which give the receiver a shot but make it harder than it needs to be. Pressure throws that are affected because of the pressure, and then screens. Those don't get counted either way. And then you have inaccurate balls, throwaways where pressure isn't a factor but just chooses to get rid of it, bad reads, and batted passes. So those are the 4 negative event categories. In this game, Goff, I didn't have him down for anything inaccurate. I had him for 2 throwaways, 3 bad reads, and 2 batted passes. And the 2 batted passes were pretty notable. So, again, the ratio is good. Just got to clean up the negative stuff. And that's the matter of this game is it was a matter of inches, right? That if you think about his first interception, if that's a few inches higher, it's like a 25-yard play. I think still probably too risky to pull the trigger there, but I think it was Craig Reynolds he was targeting. There was nobody for a long way for Craig Reynolds. And on the flip side, the batted pass on fourth down to JMO, again, same story. If he gets it past the line of scrimmage, that's a 20-plus yard chunk play for a first down. So it was close, but it wasn't totally there.
Well, to be fair, on the first interception, which he's trying to target Reynolds, he just doesn't get it over the linebacker's head. Bit of a ball don't lie moment, if we're being honest, because just a couple plays before that,
Yeah.
Goff, under pressure in the end zone, tries to throw it away. It hits Taylor Decker. They rule that there's a receiver in the area, but as pointed out on the broadcast, the ball was not heading in the direction of the receiver. So little bit of a weird ruling there. I don't know. Do you think that should have been grounding?
I prefer to see it called as grounding, but I will note that they don't call it grounding that often, and so I don't think this was a like a bizarrely ruled play. You do see that they give the quarterback a lot of slack, generally speaking. Their interpretation of in the area is quite broad, so I don't know. It is what it is. Uh, they, as a general rule, seem to bend over backwards to prevent calling safeties. So it fits in with precedent, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, and the Vikings ended up getting dinged for a grounding later in the game on which, I mean, to be fair, that it was, but yeah, so yeah, I don't know, just a weird play, but ball don't lie. The Vikings get a turnover. They end up inside the 10 or 15. We'll talk about the defensive side of things later and the goal line stands. Um, so that's the first interception. Second interception. Why are we throwing an arm punt on first and 10?
Yeah, my issue with the second interception, I think this was a Ben Johnson issue. Like, Goff probably should just throw it away, but this is just a terrible play call because if you go back and you watch this play over again, look at the screen when Goff pulls the trigger. There is not a receiver on screen, and the what the screen shows you is probably about 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. The route tree on this play gives him no options to dump it off, no options for the flat or for checkdowns while he's throwing in his own end zone in a game in which the Vikings have gotten some pressure, they've created some problems where you almost had a safety earlier in the game. I don't get why we're doing this sort of play with a play action and a deep route tree, which is basically telling Goff you're going to have to sit in the pocket for at least 5 seconds. Like, as unfortunate and kind of momentum killing as that was, because it was right after they took the ball over from the Vikings. Everyone was feeling good. They put the offense out there and they turn it right back over. It's definitely wind out of the sails. But as unfortunate as that was, an interception around midfield is far from the worst outcome that play could have been. Like,
Mhm.
anytime you are doing play action with a deep route tree like that while Goff is standing in his own end zone, you are risking a safety. You are risking a strip sack touchdown. And just doesn't really make any sense to me. If you want to try to hit them over the top because they're not suspecting it from that vantage point, okay, but you have to give him a check down option. Like, you have to give him a way to get out of a sketchy situation if it arises. And other than throwing it away, the only real option was just to heave it. Throws to a guy who's not really open, and it's not a great throw either. Just a bad play all around.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the Pride of Detroit guys also pointed out that Jamison Williams stopped running his route
Yeah.
at the apex there. So he either wasn't expecting the ball or I don't know what happened. Gives up on the route, and Harrison Smith gets a very easy interception for him. Now, to flip to something more positive, Jahmyr Gibbs in this game, he obviously has the four touchdowns, like 170 total yards in this game. So in the first quarter, he opens the scoring with a nice breakaway run. At the start of the second quarter, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, he takes one of the biggest hits a Lions player has taken in the last 5 years, getting absolutely popped by Van Ginkel. And then he goes to the sideline, recovers, and then goes on to have his best career game so far. Just what an absolute lightning bolt he was, especially in the second half, breaking the dam. And once again, he is proving to be quite the Vikings killer, eh?
Yeah, he is a big problem. Trying to think of the tweet. I think it was from Reef Hassan, the Vikings guy. I don't remember who the running back he cited was, but it was like Jahmyr Gibbs is to Brian Flores as so and so was to Mike Zimmer, as sort of like the kryptonite of their defense kind of thing. And really, to me, what this game sort of was with Gibbs is this is why you draft a running back high, right? Like this is why you do it, because these were not really gaping holes. Like, he'd get a bit of a seam and then turns. what for Craig Reynolds is going to be 8 yards into 25, into 40, right? Just the ability. I mean, the one touchdown run where he slithers right by the Amon-Ra block, like almost touching the
Oh,
block, just like
yeah.
gets through the tiniest little area, and he's able to still keep running at top speed. Just the explosive ability of Gibbs matched with the vision that he showed on the one run where he sort of cuts out, then back over. It just stuff that you really can't get elsewhere in the draft. And it goes into a bit of point of mine I was thinking about this week leading up to the game. I was looking at the yardage leaders in the NFL this year, and you look at the top running backs this season. You have Derrick Henry, you have Saquon Barkley, you have Gibbs, you have Jacobs, you have Jonathan Taylor, you have Bijan Robinson. Those are 6 of the top 7, I believe, who finished in rushing yardage, the other one being Kyren Williams. Those 6 have something in common. They were all first-round picks or early second-round picks. And the reigning OPOY did not really play much this year, Christian McCaffrey, but he was also a first-round pick. So for all the talk that, just toss Isaiah Pacheco out there, he's no different than a top 10 running back. Turns out he is. Like, I'm sorry, but it's just the sort of plays that these guys can make, the explosiveness, the athleticism is a major difference. And it shows out in games like this. And it's kind of been a revenge of the running back year. And if Montgomery wasn't on the team and they were feeding Gibbs all the time, there's a scenario where Gibbs is winning, OPOY instead of probably Saquon. I mean, he got to almost 2,000 scrimmage yards despite being in a tandem for about 14 weeks.
Yeah, and look, Gibbs finishes the regular season 1,929 total yards, 20 total touchdowns. And, for Jared Goff, probably a familiar sight to have an elite running back playing so well, very reminiscent of those dominant Todd Gurley years in terms of the touchdown production and as well as the total yardage, because Gurley was also a great receiver for Goff back in the day before his knees went to shit. But Gibbs, look, if he had been anything other than what he is, people would have said that was a bad pick, right? If he was a starting level running back, it's not a good pick at 12. But because he has been this elite, this good, this dominant, probably has the best pure acceleration of any running back in the league. Top end speed, there's a few guys that are there with him, but just pure acceleration. I don't think I've seen anything like it. Maybe Jameson Williams, his teammate, or Tyreek Hill. But at the running back position, he is just he gets up to that to speed so quickly. It's insane. His 0 to 60 has to be the fastest in the league. He erases angles, and his vision is actually so good. He had some rough spots in his rookie year, but he has quickly just developed such good patience and a great feel for the running lanes that develop. He trusts his offensive line. He knows how to run behind them, and his offensive line returns the favor, like on the 4th touchdown. If he gets hit near the line of scrimmage and he's in front of his offensive lineman, they're going to push him forward for another 3-4 yards. No play is going to be dead, and he just keeps turning his feet. He's just so good at everything. Like, there's no other way to say it. He's just so good at everything that is asked of him, and I don't know if there's a true weakness in his game.
No, I mean, he still occasionally has some runs where I'm like, oh, I think he missed a cut there or whatever, but he makes up for it with the amount of hidden yards he can get just from his pure athletic abilities. And he is an absolute star in the league. It feels like there is still another level of productiveness that he could potentially get to, particularly as a receiver, and if he got more touches on the ground. But regardless, he has been unreal. And against a team like the Vikings, just really, really good stuff this season. And you can make a case he is the top 3 player on this team, something like that. There's definitely an argument.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is they have so many good pieces, especially on offense, that like he might be the 3rd best player on offense, but he's just one of the best players in the league still. Like, between Sewell and Amon-Ra, like, It's tough, but it's just he's so good. And I think this is a very key distinction because a lot of players have good athletic gifts. I'll go to Miami again. Devon Achan. He has a lot of athletic gifts. He is super fast, super agile, very twitchy in the open field, but he doesn't get the production on the ground. They have to manufacture 35 screen passes to him a game to get him production. Or DeAndre Swift, our old friend. He was a very athletically gifted back, but he never figured out how to be elite. There's the old Deuce Staley quote that says, if I can't make this guy one of the best running backs in the league, I've failed. And I'm paraphrasing, but Swift never put it all together. So what is the big difference? Obviously, Gibbs is more like just quicker and twitchier than Swift, but it's the IQ, it's the vision, it's the patience, it's the other things that go into being a running back that has allowed Gibbs to become one of the best in the league, and he will be for a long, long time. Like, he's only, what, 22, 23? He's going to be here for at least, like, running backs have a shorter shelf life, but he's going to be one of the top backs for probably another 4 or 5 years, right? Like,
I I would certainly think so.
it's very rare in the NFL today that you see running backs make it to a second contract period. And Gibbs is a guy that, a rare case of someone you look at and be like, yeah, he could play 8 years as a dominant starter. Would anyone be shocked?
No, I don't think so.
And look, uh, running backs, as I just said, tread on the tires is going to be a big thing. Having David Montgomery here for multiple years is going to ease up the workload on Gibbs. If Montgomery wasn't here and Gibbs was the sole back the entire year, yeah, he'd put up 2,000 rushing yards in a season, probably pretty easily too. But that's just not the case. The Lions have the tandem for a reason, and it's so that Gibbs' longevity is extended beyond the typical running back lifespan. So people are going to be frustrated with that when Montgomery comes back in the divisional round next year, the year after, when Montgomery's less efficient but is soaking up 14, 15 touches a game. Look, man, it's just how the Lions roll. Montgomery is going to do his job, and Gibbs will be electric when he gets on the field. It's just, it's going to be fun to watch for years. Now moving on past the running backs, the receivers, it wasn't the biggest day for St. Brown or JMO. JMO gets over 1,000 yards receiving, should mention that. But Sam Laporta was another guy who impressed me as a receiver. He was involved a lot more. Again, it seems like he's really been ramping up over the last stretch of the season here, eh?
Yeah, I thought he was pretty solid in this game. Overall, like the receiver distribution was fine. They gave a few catches to different guys, but no one was particularly dominant. Laporta was there. They were all there. Like particular plays that stand out in my mind. Amon-Ra had one where Goff fitted into a really tight window, and then Amon-Ra made a great catch with a lot of contact. JMO had one where he caught it and absolutely got popped and held on. And then Laporta had some solid ones, like over the middle of the field where they were chunk gains to move the offense forward. But again, no one particularly stood out in any way. I think Khalif Raymond got a catch in this game as well. He came back as a returner as well. But yeah, not too many receiver notes for me. This was really a Gibbs show, and then conversation about Goff.
Yeah. So with that being said, do you have any other notes? Like, did you want to talk offensive line at all, or?
Yeah, I thought one more note on Laporta. I thought this was one of their best tight end blocking games of the year. I thought they were really good on the ground. In particular, the combo of, I think it was Wright with Laporta, blow open or really cave in the end of the line to set up the one Gibbs touchdown run. But I thought they were on rewatch really consistent all day long. I thought the Glasgow had some issues early on, kind of seemed to settle in as the game went along, but they felt like they were asking him to do too much. There was two separate plays early in that game. There's the run on third down where they're asking Glasgow to get out into space and block Grenard, and if he does, they might pick it up, depending on if Amon-Ra gets a proper block or not. But I just don't love that. And then again, they throw a screen to JMO in the first half where they're asking Glasgow to get out into space. And the speed of the Vikings defense specifically sidelined sideline east-west stuff was really popping, and I just didn't feel like Glasgow had a fair shot to make some of those plays. Beyond that, offensive line, they had I think 2 false starts that were kind of frustrating that set them back, some pass pro things, but then as the game went along, they kind of settled in. Running back blitz pickups I thought were pretty good as the game went along. So the team was in a bit of a funk early, but then they started to get going after that.
Yeah, I do want to say Zeitler also had some of those problems in the run game. Just pulling when the guards were pulling in this game, it did not work. The Vikings linebackers and edge players are too fast laterally. It just wasn't work. There was the one holding Zeitler picked up that was a little ticky tacky, but you got like you still got to call it if you're the ref because it looks like a holding and it affected the linebacker a little bit, but. Graham, yeah, like you said, the one miss on Grenard, it was just both guys. Like I too much lateral stuff. We talk about this all the time, where the screens drove me crazy all game with how ineffective they were and how good the Vikings were at stuffing them out. But all of the lateral stuff in the run, too much to the outside. The Lions are a lot better when they get north south, a lot more duo inside zone, that kind of stuff. Like I always want to see more of that and less of these stretches, less of these counters and pulling. Like the stuff that takes too long to develop. It once again was biting the Lions, but they figured it out. I guess we should mention were the screens frustrating you as much as they were frustrating me in that game?
Well, I think it's when we talk about like the screens or slow developing plays or whatever you want to kind of phrase it. It just depends on what's working in the game and what you're seeing. And to me, what I saw early in this game was the Vikings were really keying in on those, and it kind of felt like that as the game went along, their insistence on continuing to throw it got a little dangerous. Obviously, the Van
Whew.
Ginkel uh, dropped interception, although that was going to be a really good play if he made it. Like it wasn't, on a silver platter. Like he was going to have to reach out and snag that thing and bring it in, but had a chance to do it certainly. But I don't understand throwing that one after the way he annihilated Gibbs on
Yeah.
that swing pass earlier in the game. He shows you there, okay, if you're throwing to my side, I am going to fire at it immediately. And I feel like after they show you that, then maybe, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to run play action off of that. And, we'll fake it, see if we can get him to bite, and then try and get something to hit off of it. But the speed and the aggressiveness they showed going to the sideline just to me made that seem like, okay, let's move away from that and try a few other things. And they were a little late to adjust there, was my take on it. But I didn't think it. When I went back through the tape, I didn't feel like they ran a million screens, and it was just a couple that stood out as particularly dangerous issues. My biggest thing with Ben Johnson this game, honestly, besides the play call on the interception that I criticized, but was the 4th and 1. And I know it's open. I know if Goff doesn't have it get batted down, it's going to be a big gain. But it was like 4th and a foot. Just sneak it, man. Like, if it's 4th and a full yard, if it's 4th and a yard and a half, okay, I can see it more. But Jared Goff's 6'4". You've had immense success sneaking the ball. The Vikings didn't come out of the timeout with 4 350-pound nose tackles in the A gap. Like if he sneaks it there, I'm pretty sure they get it. And in that situation, just do that and move the sticks and just keep going as opposed to throwing it there, because when you throw it, even though you trust your quarterback and you trust your receivers, there's so many things that can go wrong on a pass versus a sneak, right? With a sneak, it's like either we get it or we don't. And with a pass, like the pass protection might break down. The quarterback could stumble. He could throw a ball that gets batted down by the lineman. The receiver could drop the ball. There's just a lot of ways a passing play can go wrong versus a quarterback sneak. So I just prefer to play it safe there.
And look, fair enough. The Lions don't sneak it as much as we want them to. Every time that I mean, you fired off a tweet instantly. Like this is the football gods punishing you for not sneaking the ball. we've seen the Eagles they've been doing this for years with the tush push, right? And no one's going to do it as well as them, but you expect that you could get half a yard to a yard every single time you sneak it if you need to. So maybe that's something they bring out in the playoffs. Like you said, we have seen it this season. We've seen it like for the last few years, right? And Goff has been very adequate at it. So to be determined. But aside from that, do you have any other notes?
Not on the offense. Other than just saying holistically, it's again a funny game in that we spend a lot of the game decrying the offense. They're not doing enough, and you get to the end of the game, they put up almost 400 yards, 6.0 yards per play, 31 points on a team that is generally one of the better defenses in the league. So
Yeah.
when these are the down games, or when these are the games where half of it we're complaining and these are the final results, you're in pretty good shape.
In the last 2 years, so 34 regular season games, right? The Vikings have allowed 30 or more points 7 times. The Lions are responsible for 4 of them. Don't know what else to
Pretty
say.
good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So, with that being said, flipping over to the more fun story of the night. Aaron Glenn's defense, with however many injuries at this point, puts on perhaps their grittiest performance of the season. They hold the Vikings out of the end zone. They hold them to 9 points on the day. An absolutely spectacular performance from start to finish. There's so much to break down with this, but we have to start at the main story of the night. Amik Robertson covering Justin Jefferson holds him to 3 catches. He got beat bad once and then held him in check the rest of the game. Jordan Addison has 1 reception for 0 yards because Terrion Arnold covers him so well. The Lions' outside corners had themselves a day.
Yeah, this was a great game from both guys. Robertson comes out in the grading on PFF, I believe, is 61, which had a lot of people riled up. My take on that after watching the tape back over is it's like a classic example of PFF, to my understanding, they do not grade on a curve or make any sort of adjustment for circumstances where they just sort of like, these are the results, it is what it is. That like if you do this, then you get this grade. Doesn't really matter what the context is. Because when you look at it from a bird's eye view, you're like, okay, he got beat sometimes. He gave up 3 catches, 50-some yards. There were some plays where Jefferson was open in the end zone and Darnold didn't find him. I can see how they got there, but he's covering Justin Jefferson, right? Like, if 61 grade if you're covering Khalif Raymond, like, okay, sure, I can see how you get there, but you're covering Justin Jefferson, and this was one of his least productive games of the year. We have seen games where the Lions play the Vikings and Jefferson is wide open without a defender on screen. We've seen games where they play Justin Jefferson and he just dunks on guys, and Robertson, I think, fought him to about a draw. Like, yeah, there were reps that he got beaten. Some of them were punished, some were unpunished. But he also beat Jefferson on reps. He had at least 2 PBUs that I remember, one of which could have been an interception. And even the plays where Jefferson was open, outside of one in particular that I can remember, they were the kind of like, oh, he's got some room. You got to hit him where he is open and he should catch it. Not he's got 7 yards of separation kind of open. So adjusting for the fact that he's playing the best wide receiver in the NFC, I think this was a fabulous effort from Amik Robertson.
I will say I've only gotten through about a quarter and a half of the tape because we're recording on Tuesday. This episode will go up later today. I only got access to the All-22 this morning, and so I've only gone through about a quarter and a bit. There was a couple of plays where the route Jefferson was running, he would get open on the initial move, but then the double move would bring him back into Robertson's coverage, which, and look, you have to give Robertson credit for recovering, obviously, but there's a few times where it's like, okay, well, yeah, he was covered well, but it's kind of because Robertson got beat and then the route took him back into where the coverage is. So I do want to put a little bit of a note on that because Jefferson is probably the best route runner in the league. As a, like you can pick a handful of guys there, but the
Well,
one
and
yeah,
the one thing I want to add to that is that was also true a little bit of Jordan Addison, where there's that play in the end zone where it's like a kind of a
mm,
pseudo pick of sorts. So he runs, he's lined up more inside, then he breaks out, and there's a little bit of a rub, and Terrion is a little late, and Darnold's staring right at him, and people are like, why didn't he just throw it right there where he was wide open? Well, the route he's running is an over and up route. And so he breaks out and he's open, but then as he breaks up, it gives Terrion time to recover. And so I think the reason Darnold doesn't throw it is it's not an out route, it's an out and an up. And if he does throw it up, maybe it's still completed, but it would have been a hell of a lot more contested than it would have been if it had just been an out route. So there's just I don't know, maybe the route trees were just a little weird, but that was something I noticed.
there was also the other Addison one in the end zone where he breaks in on a slant and Tyrion like off the jump gets a half step behind. He recovers pretty quickly, but then Addison runs to the back of the end zone where Tyrion ends up meeting him. And then he has to kind of like scramble drill, tries to run back towards the front of the end zone, and Tyrion breaks it up. It was just a lot of good recoveries by the DBs. Although I will say they also had a number of very good reps in general. Robertson had what I posted this on Twitter, the a clip where it might have been the Lions' best coverage rep of the season, where Terrion covers a dig route to Addison perfectly, Branch covers a wheel route to Hawkinson perfectly, and Robertson like puts Jefferson like in a jail cell with the press coverage, like just a perfect press man rep where he forces Jefferson to the outside, but like he's within a half yard of him the entire way. Like it was just perfect coverage. So there were a number of those as well. Just a very solid day from the DBs. Kirby Joseph didn't have as active of a game as we've come to expect from him. He was very clearly hunting for interceptions over the middle on a few plays, but is what it is. You're not going to get them every week. Branch, I thought Branch was fine. He's going to get a fine. He almost got a penalty for a interesting hit on backup tight end John Oliver, I think his name is.
Maybe.
But
I don't know.
he absolutely smoked him. Oliver popped right back up, but yeah, that's gonna get Branch another fine. So not gonna do anything to dispel the dirty allegations from the Vikings fan base. But aside from that, DBs were solid. Now we're gonna work our way down here. So linebackers, Alex Anzalone comes back. What was the immediate impact of him being back for the linebacker room and the defense as a whole?
Well, the immediate impact was that the opposition had to actually play offense and come up with game plans, right? Like the biggest change is that we've seen several weeks where it's just like the offense rolls in and they're like, okay, we'll just throw it over the middle over and over and over and over and over and over again. And we don't really have to come up with a real game plan or an approach. It's just we'll target this gaping hole in your defense. And that then closes up and they have to look around a little more, and it gives your pass rush more time to get home. It gives the other team's quarterback more of a challenge. He has to think about different places to go with it, etc. And so that was seen pretty immediately. Anzalone had a really lively day with T.J. Hawkinson. They were going back and forth. Hawk had some that he got open on the too early that Darnold misses in both occasions. There was a Vikings fan I saw earlier today, and let me be clear that there is a little bit of a all 22 Monday morning quarterback situation going on with Vikings fans. Like, I'm not going to say Darnold was good in this game. He made some errors, no question about it. But I am seeing a little bit of the thing the Ohio State fans did last year with Kyle McCord after the Michigan game, where you take the all 22 and you're like, oh, wow, look, I found a receiver open by a half step on every single play. So therefore, a good quarterback would have gone 44 for 44 for 700 yards and 9 touchdowns, right? Or it's like, because I saw this reel of Hawkinson, and it was like, if Darnold had a brain, Hawkinson would have destroyed this game. And the first two were the misses. Those were misses. Those are on Darnold. But then the next two, like there's the one that Hawkinson thought he caught and Dan challenged it and they went incomplete. I watched this clip and I don't know how they're blaming it on Darnold. Like he looks at his first read, not open. Goes to his second read, Hawkinson. He is open. Pulls the trigger. As he pulls the trigger, Levi Onwuzurike is bull rushing the center into him, and the throw is in the dirt. Like that's not on Darnold. That's a perfectly normal rep. And so there were plays where Hawkinson was open by a bit and Darnold missed him. There were also plays where Darnold wasn't able to get to him in time. And there were plays where Anzalone covered him well. So I think it was kind of like the Robertson Jefferson battle, where it's like, he won some reps, lost some reps, but there was a battle. And that's a huge difference between the previous weeks, where the Lions against anybody's tight end or really anyone's receiver in the middle of the field was not a battle. It was just open every single play.
Now, are we sure you're not just showing your bias as a TJ Hawkinson hater? Why do you hate Hawkinson, by the way?
I mean, it's partially that quote, right? Like that's, the one about like finally I get to win games or whatever. The other one is just like, I don't know. He came in from Iowa and there was all this hype about like how he was supposed to be really good, and he's a fine player, but didn't really live up to his draft position, didn't really become the dominant blocker he was supposed to be. Just always felt like there was more there that they couldn't really get out of him. And then he goes to Minnesota and then talks trash about it, and so I don't know, just not my favorite player in the world. We'll just put it that way.
His blocking is because when he actually gets his hands on someone, he actually is a good blocker. But it's like the blocking IQ isn't there, and he'll just miss his assignment or not read the play right, like in run blocking. I don't know. Very weird player. But now we have better Iowa tight ends, so it's okay. Now I should mention before we move on from the linebackers, Jack Campbell. He had a mostly good day. Might have had the single worst linebacker rep of the season, though, on the Cam Akers 58 whatever yard run down inside the 10, where he just doesn't realize it's a run play and just goes to cover the tight end for some reason. It's really
a
funny.
very weird play. And Anzalone gets himself behind the play as well. Both guys share a little bit of the blame. Also of the blame is it's the second team defensive line who just get sat on right off the snap. So that was real bad. I don't know why the Vikings offense brings out the worst run reps of the year, because this was the worst after the previous worst in the first matchup. So not great, but otherwise I thought Campbell was fine. I thought really a story of this game too is the check down defense, where the Vikings dumped it off into the flat a number of times to running backs, wide receivers, maybe tight ends on some occasions too, and they were all tackled really quickly. The Lions were right to it. I know Melifonwu had a stick. I know Robertson had a stick. Campbell got out on one. That was really good to see. I went back and last night was watching the Rams wildcard game from last year, and that was something that stood out to me, was they really struggled tackling in that game. A lot of free yards, and that was right after I'd watched this tape over again, and I was like, man, there were really no missed tackles in this game. Like the only ones were on like the runs where Aaron Jones would, cut back in the backfield and he'd make 2 yards out of what should have been -3, which he's really good at. But anything through the air, the tackling was phenomenal in the passing game.
Those Jones plays were driving me crazy. Where it's like, I think Akers had one too, where it's like, you just got to wrap up, man. That's an easy -2, -3, 2nd and 13, let's go. And instead it's 2nd and 5.
Yep.
And I can excuse the missed tackles if it's just a stop at the line or a 1 yard gain. But the fact that he was getting good runs out of those plays really drove me crazy. But it happened like 3 or 4 times, so it's not that big of a deal, but was a point of frustration. Now moving on to the defensive line. This was a game where Zadarius Smith, revenge game. He needed 2 sacks to hit a bonus. He gets 1. He nearly had his second one in the 4th, but he was really hunting for it. Is what it is. He had a fine game on the edge, getting some good pressure. Josh Pascal continues to be a very solid run defender that occasionally has a good bull rush every now and again. Levi Onwuzurike, though, was the one who really just had a fantastic game. I believe he was credited with 9 pressures, which is fantastic. That's, I mean, I don't know what the single game leaders are this season, but it's very rare to see someone get that many pressures in a game. And he was doing it from both the 3 tech and the edge spots. So, what did you see from Levi in this one?
Levi was great. That popped on the rewatch, no question about it. He was really all over the place, rushing inside, outside. He's responsible for both sacks the Lions get in this game.
Mm-hmm.
First one flushes Darnold outside on the run right into Zadarius Smith. Second one, he kind of gets to the feet of Darnold and immobilizes him with pressure up the middle. And then because Darnold is frozen, it gives Muhammad time to come around the side and finish it off. So those are 2 great plays, but again, just consistently disruptive. I think this is his best game as a Lion, and therefore his best game as a pro player. So we don't necessarily need him to be this dominant every week, though it would be nice if he could, but you just need one guy on the defensive line to play above their caliber in a given week, right? For the next 2 games to get to the Super Bowl, just need one guy to really pop. And Levi Onwuzurike really popped in this game. And I actually, after going back over the tape, felt that the organic rush was better than I thought it was going to be when I watched it on replay. Like, they definitely had success blitzing, and there were times the 4-man rush didn't get home, but that's going to happen anytime. But they actually did get a number of organic rushes from their defensive linemen. And Levi was the main guy there, but also want to shout out Zadarius Smith almost had a strip sack on a ball that ended up being an incomplete pass, where he gets around the edge and hacks Darnold. And Josh Paschal had a rush against the left guard on, I think, a 3rd down in the red zone on one of those drives where they forced a field goal. So those were little ones to point out. Also, Chris Smith had the rush to force the grounding on Darnold around midfield. So it wasn't a completely dominant game from the defensive line, but you had one guy pop way above his normal baseline, and then you had each other guy, pitch in one good snap that really made a difference. And that plus the blitzing was enough to really rattle Darnold and get this Minnesota offense out of its rhythm.
Yeah, and look, we know Darnold doesn't do well with pressures. There's the infamous seeing ghosts thing from years ago. And look, everyone talks about how bad Darnold was in this game. That's why he was under pressure the entire game. This was the best the defensive line has looked in pass rush since the Hutchinson injury. Like, I don't recall them getting this much pressure without Hutchinson. So, like you said, 2 more weeks, someone has to step up, and then if you get to the Super Bowl, you get everyone back, man. But you like if Hutchinson, even if he plays, he'd be on a pitch count. But like for all intents and purposes, you get there and you get some reinforcements. Barnes might play too if he gets to the Super Bowl. So hey, I also want to shout out Muhammad. He had the sack, and he also had a couple nice run defend reps where he was setting the edge really well, forcing running backs back inside to the linebackers. So thought he's been good as a sort of pseudo edge 3 in this rotation, or 4, I guess, if you want to count Levi as one of the, I don't know, very weird rotation they have going on right now. So considering all the practice squad fodder they have cycling through, he's at least been pretty good in his role as well. Aside from that, do you have any other notes on the defense?
Yeah, let's go through these here. Blitzes I thought were pretty effective. The only thing I didn't really love is cover 0 rushing Kirby Joseph from 10 yards. I know why you do that, because you don't want to show your hand pre-snap, but I'm just never a big fan of blitzing from 10 yards, because by the time he gets there, the play is probably over. Like, the guy's either pulled the trigger or he's been sacked at that point. And I just feel like if you're going to run cover 0 and you want to blitz a free safety, roll him down a little bit further. That did get exploited on one conversion for the Vikings. Other point of notes on the goal line stands. Honestly, I thought they were pretty good from the defense in that people came away acting like Darnold missed a wide open guy on every play. I would say it was about once per particular stand, right? If you take the 3 goal line stands that were 3 or 4 plays each, usually on that sequence of 3 to 4 plays, one of them he had a guy that he could have hit and he missed him. The other plays, it was usually basically one run stuff, one chance Darnold had that he missed, and then 1 to 2 really good coverage snaps or really good pressure snaps that got in the way. And you'd expect a better quarterback to probably cash in one of those at least. But in the NFC, I don't really know what quarterback is hitting all of those, right? Like in the Super Bowl, okay, we're talking Josh Allen or Mahomes. Maybe they hit all of them.
Or
But
just
is
run
Jalen
around.
Hurts right? But like, is Jalen Hurts hitting all those? I don't think so. Like Jordan Love, I would say no. Jaden Daniels, maybe, but probably not. Like it. My point
Daniels would
is,
hit
this
it if it
isn't.
was a game-winning play.
Yeah. Yeah, so I thought this was good from the defense, and the other stops they had where they forced field goals and punts elsewhere, mostly speaking, were not Darnold errors. Those were good coverages, good PBUs, good pressures. Like the defense did play a really good game. A better quarterback would have put more points on the board for the Vikings, but I don't think a better quarterback wins this game based on what the Lions defense did and how well the Lions offense played in the end with the second half considered. And my final note on Darnold that I want to get on there is I don't think this should majorly like change your evaluation of Darnold. Like, first of all, the thing that I had in my mind, this is the biggest game Darnold's ever played.
Mm.
Like, just it is. He played on a bad Jets team. He played on a bad Panthers team. He then was a backup last year. He has not been in a lot of these situations. And the previous week, he played a huge game against a playoff team, and he was awesome. And then this week, he played a big game against a playoff team, and he wasn't very good. And sometimes that happens. We'll see how the next week goes to redeem himself. But all I'll say is that if Lamar Jackson can have his reputation completely intact, despite how he's looked when games actually matter in the playoffs, I think we should be able to cut Darnold some slack on one poor performance. But that's just me.
Yeah, I think the reason people aren't though is exactly what you just said. This is the biggest game of his career, and that was how he played. We don't really have a sample size for how Darnold does in the big moments, so we have to grade this one a little bit more egregiously until we see another big game from him.
Which we'll get in 6 days. So
Exactly.
we'll get it. We'll get an update soon.
Um, I guess one other note is this is more game theory, but the Vikings, why were they passing so much within 5 yards of the goal line?
Well, they weren't really having much success running the ball. They'd get inside the 10, and the Lions were stuffing those pretty quickly. They should have run it more, but it's not like they were having a lot of success in that area of the field running the ball either.
Just the three straight passes, the five straight passes, like you got to try something else at some point. Like there was the one series where Akers runs it from the 6 to the 3 to set up second and goal, and then they throw it 3 times and don't get any points. Why are you not trying to do, like, I don't know. Just seemed a little curious on that part. Um, Now, special teams weren't exactly a major part of this game, so I don't know if you really had any notes on that.
Uh, Thank you to the Vikings for the
Right.
sequence there at the end of the half, which was an interesting one to me because I don't know how well you remember the game that the Lions played against the Packers in Week 17, back when it was a 16-game schedule, like back in 2016, which was also the Sunday night end of the regular season NFC North on the line game. I was at that game, and the way that game played out, if you recall it, was the Lions scored to take the lead on a Zach Zenner rush right towards the end of the half. I don't remember how much time exactly, but it was under a minute. And it was like, okay, we got the lead. We're feeling good. We're getting ready to go to halftime. They kicked the ball off to the Packers, and the first play with like 20 seconds left in the half, Rodgers rolls right and fires a bomb for like 35 yards down the field. Then they run up and they run one more play, and then they get in range, and Mason Crosby bangs through like a 54-yard field goal. And I just remember how deflating that was going into the half, that it was like we seemingly finished the half on a high note, and then we gifted them 3 points. in like 12 seconds. And it was interesting to see that script exactly reversed in this case. And having been through that, I remember what that was like. And it's really nice that it was the Lions benefiting this time. But you wonder how the Vikings felt going into the locker room after that, because it is a real wind out of your sails.
Well, that it was also weird because their kicker, the kickoff before that, came really close to kicking it out of bounds again. It barely sneaks into the corner of the end zone. All is well. It ends up being one of those in the landing zones. So the Lions start at the 20 instead of the 30. And then at the end of the half, he does it again. It's like, oh, maybe we actually can go down the field and maybe we actually should go for points instead of just going into half, which is what I think everyone expected them to do. So it works out. Shout out to Bates for making that kick, and that's where you got the Khalif Raymond reception as well to make the field goal a little bit more manageable. Just nice. Oh,
Yeah, it was a nice shot in the arm because the end of that half was frustrating with the 4th and 1, and then they get points off it. So it really did just kind of flip the feeling going into halftime. So that was nice. Beyond that, Will Reichard missed a kick. Shout
yeah.
out Ford Field for that. Jack Fox, 51 average on his 2 punts. Nice job. Khalif Raymond, I thought, had one nice return in his return from injury. So again, solid. But as you mentioned, special teams didn't play a major role in this game, but there was a lot of game theory to talk about. Also, some ref talk too. So we can fast forward to those two elements.
Yeah, we can. I think I was gonna try to find it real quick. The Lions PR put this out after the game that Jack Fox set an NFL single season record in net punting average this year. So if you're a punter fan, there you go. There's some punting stats for you.
Well, what really helps him is the fact he never punts from anywhere close to midfield. Right?
Exactly.
Like that's your average gets dragged down by the 30-yard punt that's actually a good punt because you punted from the plus 45 and you were pinning him. But he never does that.
Because
So
they always
he's
go
just
for
asked
it.
Yeah, he's just asked to flip the field, which he's very good at.
Yeah. So fast forward. Let's do ref talk first. What do you got?
Well, I don't know if I brought this up on the show before. I don't remember it being an issue this year, but I don't get why the play clock isn't just like the shot clock in basketball. It's not a hard technology to have a buzzer in the stadium.
Yeah.
Right. Because in basketball there's no, oh, this time it counts because the referee didn't look at the shot clock in time. Okay, right? Like that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's just, was the ball in his hand when the buzzer went off? If yes, it's a turnover, right? Like it's black or white, it's crisp. And in football, we just have this bizarre acceptance of this gray area where sometimes they get you for delay of game literally the moment the clock hits 0, and other times you get 2 free seconds. And there's really no rhyme or reason why that's the case. And this game was egregious. And I never want to go crazy about it because sometimes the TV play clock is off, but by all accounts, it was mirroring the Ford Field play clock, and it was an issue there as well. You could see the Lions defensive players on the field. I know at least one, Alex Anzalone, was like, "Hey, hey, hey," and then they still got the snap off anyway. And it's just it's like the spotting the ball thing, where in tennis we can have technology that tells us if the ball is out by a tenth of a millimeter, but in football we just let a 65-year-old with aging eyes attempt to guess where the ball was, right? Like we have technology to fix this, and it's really frustrating when we have these issues happen, especially because if the referees are going to be lax on delay of game, it's always going to help the road team, right? Like it just is.
Yeah.
The road team is always going to be the one having more communication issues because the crowd is loud. And in this case, that was a pretty notable thing because the Vikings got probably at least 10 free yards on missed delay of games in this game, some of them on third downs. So that's frustrating. My other ref talk note, we did the grounding. The defensive holdings, illegal contacts, were a little ticky-tack in the second half. My only thought on that was, if you're going to call it that way, it's kind of unnerving that they didn't give any to the Lions, because if the threshold has been established of what we're calling for illegal contact, which was pretty strict, seems implausible that only one team was culpable of it, but whatever.
Well, there's also a flip side to this. After the game, Justin Jefferson was like, they were holding us, all game. They were holding us a lot. I don't want to make an excuse though. We played through it. But it's like, well, why are you talking about it then? There was the
Yeah,
one
and
fourth down that Amik like kind of pushed on his shoulder pad while Jefferson was trying to break outside. Then Darnold throws it to a 20-foot giant and misses. Like, and then he's like complaining. He's like, he's on my shoulder pad. It's like, no, he's not. He's just literally putting his hand on you so he knows where you are.
yeah, and the at least the holding slash illegal contacts that were called were not super like egregious, like grab and yank. Like the one on Branch was one of those where it's like, I'm in your way, I'm in your way, I'm in your way, and just impedes him for too long outside the contact zone, sort of thing. It wasn't particularly egregious, and I think that Branch one is the one they throw like 5 seconds after it happened, 2 seconds after the third down pass falls incomplete.
The one that we all thought they were calling pass interference on Robertson.
Oh, right, because it's thrown after that pass, and instead, no, it's on something that happened like many seconds before that. I don't
It's
understand that one.
it seems like
It,
one where it was like they were gonna throw PI, and then another official was like, "That is not PI," and they were like, "Okay, but this guy also did this or something." I don't know. Like,
yeah, there's nothing more frustrating in football than the NBA missed the shot, but then we call the foul because he missed the shot.
yeah.
Whistle.
Well,
But
just
I
the
don't know.
refs' refusal to pick up flags.
Yeah. And my other thought on the ref talk side of this, but the final 5 minutes of that game was like the longest 5 minutes ever of a game that was decided. Like, oh my God, that took like 25 minutes to finish a game that was in the books because of various reviews and other things. So it was kind of a sloppily refereed game. I don't really think one team was majorly favored in the officiating than the other one because obviously there was the grounding, which we discussed. But yeah, just not the cleanest game in the world.
To be fair, it could have been worse. We could have had the Bucks and Saints crew that took 25 minutes to figure out that a flag between downs should make it 1st and 10 further back instead of 1st and 25 or whatever. Could have been worse. Don't let that crew anywhere near the playoffs, please. That would be bad. All right. Now, game theory. Hit me with that.
All right. So the Lions have three of them of note. 4th and 5 from the +39, late first quarter scoreless. They go and they get it on the Jameson Williams one. I think I was fine going for it there.
Yeah, because it was going to be what, a 59-yard field goal.
Probably 57, 58.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I go back and forth on that. Like it's fine because it worked out. I don't know. I don't think I would have regretted it if they didn't get it. So I guess that means
It was right on that edge for me, I feel like, because if it's uh, longer than 4th and 5, you probably don't go. And if the field goal is shorter than 57, 58, you probably
probably
don't
kick
go.
it.
But it just happened to be right on that edge that I think it made sense. Um, Lions also have a 4th and 1 at the +42, more like 4th and a foot. Obviously a go. Don't think there's any
Yep.
question there. They
Bad
don't
call.
get it. And
Yep.
then 4th and 2 from the +9, late third quarter, up 10-9. This is the Gibbs touchdown catch. This one was also interesting. I was kind of on the fence about this one. I felt like field goal made sense in what was a low-scoring game at that point. On the other hand, it was 4th and 2, which is pretty gettable with this team, and a touchdown could really flip the feel of the game. So again, I was right on the fence.
So that one I'm go for it because you don't at that point you don't know if you're going to get back in the red zone based on how the game has gone. You got to maximize the trip down there. So I'm happy going for that.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna begrudge them if they went and didn't get it. It was right on the fringe. The other note about that play, they score the touchdown. They're up 16-9. There was the ability to go for two and make it a two-score game. If you don't get it, then you're only up 7. How do we feel about this one?
How much time was left when that happened?
This is late third quarter, so there was a lot of time.
I think if it's later in the game, you go for two, but because of how much time is left, you just go make an 8 point game, make them have to go for two then on the other side if they would have scored.
Yeah, that was my feeling of it too, is that if it's at the end of the game and you've got the ability to gain 2 yards and essentially end the game, then I think
Yeah,
you
like
do
if
it.
there's 3 minutes left and you make it a 2 score game, you do it.
Well, and the Bears against the Packers had that ability at one point in their game, and they chose not to go for two. And I feel like if you're the Bears in that situation, you got nothing to lose. Why not roll the dice? But in the Lions' standpoint, I think it made sense to kick. So I didn't have an issue there. On the flip side, we have a lot of situations for the Vikings to discuss. They had a 4th and goal at the 3, down 7-0. They went for and didn't get it. They had a 4th and goal at the 7, down 7-0, and they kicked. They had 4th and goal at the 2, down 10-6, and they went and they didn't get it. And then they had a fourth, what is it? A fourth down on the 33, mid third quarter, down 10-6. They kick, and then they had a 4th and 4 at the plus 34, late third quarter, down 17-9, and they kick. 5 different scenarios there. I don't know if you have a take on any of those in particular.
Well, the big take is they were trying to be the Lions. They were trying to match the Lions in this game, and it did not work. So, excuse me. The 4th and goals from inside the 5. You go for that. You go for that every time because it's very obtainable and you needed to score a touchdown, right? Like you need the points against the Lions offense. The one I have an issue with is later in the game after failing on a couple of 4th and goals. 4th and 4, they elect not to go for it, and Reichert ends up missing the kick anyways, so it doesn't matter. But you have to go for that there. You can't stop being aggressive in that moment. That just seemed like Kevin O'Connell cowering and trying to atone for not getting it earlier, and it just blew up in his face.
Yeah, it was interesting because the 4th and goal from the 3, early, okay, you go, that makes a lot of sense. 4th and goal from the 7 makes sense to kick. 4th and goal from the 2, by that point it felt like they were so snake bitten that you almost thought about kicking, but again, it's from the 2, you have to go. The kick later, okay, that makes sense. It goes down to 10-9, you're 1 field goal away. But then as you mentioned, that 4th and 4 later was really surprising in the way they kind of then just suddenly stopped the way they were coaching the rest of the game, and it didn't really make a ton of sense to me. And then they got punished immediately for it, and they missed the field goal. Lions get the short field, and then they drive and start to put the game away. So just an inconsistent decision that ended up turning out in a way that was probably justified.
Yep. Only other one I want to briefly mention is the Lions getting the Vikings to jump on the 4th down, because I had messaged you and been like, if they go for this, I'm gonna hate it. I don't even care if they score. You got to go up 18 in this spot. They were going to. They just wanted to see if the Vikings would jump, and they did. So
yeah, and they were smart enough to know they weren't going to go there. You have to kick, make it a 3-score game. They knew that. But what's great about it is that the dinosaurs who make up talk radio and TV discussion about the NFL legitimately think Dan Campbell is just a madman, and
yeah.
that has really helped the Lions in that it's gotten other coaches and other teams to think there's no logic or reason behind why they go when they go. So you get in a situation where it should be fairly obvious they're not going, and everyone's like, well, they're going to go because they're the Lions. And then, boom, they jump. So in the end, it works out for you.
Yeah. So aside from that, do you have any concluding thoughts on this game and the Lions' regular season as a whole, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, my main thought about the regular season is this was a pretty remarkable regular season in a lot of ways. They win 15 games, ninth team in NFL history to win 15 games, including the Chiefs this very season. That alone is an achievement. Usually, when you win 15 games, it is one of those everything went right for us years, which is why it's even crazier they got 15 wins with the situation they had. I don't think anyone before the season, if you were told Hutchinson will only play the first 4.5 games. Other injuries will follow later in the year. I don't think anyone in a million years would have said 15 wins was going to be the result of those circumstances. So Dan Campbell should be coach of the year. I don't know if he will because voters are dumb and they make this into a who exceeded expectations more award, which is very stupid. But you can make the case Campbell exceeded expectations given the injuries that happened. Even with that, my other note about this, the Lions finished with a plus 222 point differential, which was 15th highest in the Super Bowl era. Of the other 14 teams in the sample, 10 of them went to the Super Bowl, where they went 5-5. So pretty solid track record there. And a number of those teams, at least a few of them, were pre-merger. So I think they were 11th best post-merger. So this is a special regular season that people remember for a long time. Hopefully there is the payoff in the playoffs, but there might not be. That's the way it goes. And I think people should use this next little bit to remember this group really fondly, because what they achieved in the regular season, we may never see again as Lions fans.
And with the Chiefs resting their starters and losing, the Lions, because of the point differential, and conference wins, they leapfrog the Chiefs and end the regular season as the number one team in the entire league. No Lions fans ever been able to say that. So pretty
Pretty cool. Just a great season overall for the team. Immaculately coached, great, historically great offense, as we talked about last week. A defense that, when they had some players, was pretty solid, and they had incredible special teams, incredible coaching, and they took advantage of, and they won the most difficult division ever.
Yeah.
They got to 15 wins despite not being able to bank your usual, free spaces that you might get in a really bad division.
The Chicago Bears had more losses than the Lions, Vikings, and Packers combined. Now, granted, the Packers kind of screwed this up by losing to the Bears, because it could have been the Lions won the division last year at 12-5. The Packers almost could have gone 12-5 to be the 7th seed in the NFC this year, which would have been hilarious. But they blow it. They decide that having a 1-5 record in the division is funnier. So can't fault them for that. But yeah, just an insane year by the Lions, considering how good everyone was around them. In terms of the Eagles, they basically never stopped losing. The Vikings, they never stopped losing. If the Vikings had won this game, I would have been able to pull a clip from you saying they weren't going to run the table. They almost did. Almost did. They just refused to lose. So the Lions, they basically they had to fight every single week and win every single week just to get the 1 seed, which we thought, if you had said at the start of the season, yeah, the Lions are going to have 15 wins, you would have said, oh, the 1 seed is clinched by like week 15. Easy. But nope. Much more difficult path to get there than the Chiefs had, by contrast, in the AFC. So very special. Now, we are going to do a quick wildcard preview because the Lions obviously have a bye week, so we need something to talk about. Before that, though, do you want to talk about any of the Week 18 games?
The only thing that I think is worth mentioning is that no one wanted to win.
No.
Nobody that had anything really to play for wanted to win. Even the teams that had a playoff berth on the line. Like, it took the Bucks quite a while to pull that game out. The Falcons end up losing that game, giving up 44 points to the Panthers. Shout out Bryce Young, continues to cook. Finished the season really looking good. So optimism in Carolina for the first time in a long time. But otherwise, it was just really a sign of how little teams care about seeding in the playoffs, including the Rams, including the Packers, a number of these teams that, in theory, had something very material to gain in getting a better seed, just had no interest in playing for it. But alongside that, the only thing I really want to focus on in a game is, what were the Packers doing at the end of that game against the Bears?
That might have been Matt LaFleur's worst coaching blunder so far. Just brain dead.
Yeah, the clock management bad, and then they come out 15 seconds left in the strangest defense where they
Yeah,
got
prevent.
they got three deep safeties like it's a Hail Mary. And then everyone else is lined up on the sideline besides the three down linemen and one linebacker in the middle of the field. And I'm looking at the Bears and I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, just throw to the middle of the field where absolutely nobody is, run up and spike it, and you'll get at least a kick. And like that's a defense you run with 5 seconds left in a game, not 15 seconds left in a game. It just they seem totally unaware of the situation. Bears took advantage, spiked it, and then they stunningly made the kick against all odds, pulling that game out. But just really weird turn of events there at the end of that game.
Yeah, so shout out the Packers or sorry, to the Bears for ending their losing streak to the Packers. Um, they got a win in the division against all odds. They finished 1-5 in the division, just like the Packers. They are exactly the same. By the way, have you ever seen an 11-win team go 1-5 in their division?
Seems impossible for someone to have done that. But
Uh,
first time for everything, I guess.
and they were a blocked field goal away from going 0-6. Just man, the Packers are just such a weird team, man. But anyways,
They have
oh,
bad vibes going into the playoffs. We'll put it that way.
and speaking of those playoffs, Wildcard Weekend, we got 6 games to preview here. We'll just run through them all quickly because it's a lot of football, but it should be a good weekend. First of all, as I said earlier in the show, the fact that there is a Monday night wildcard game is a crime, and the NFL should hate themselves for doing that. You could have just had triple headers on Saturday and Sunday. Do the AFC on Saturday, NFC on Sunday. I don't care. Everything was set up perfectly, and you ruined it. But we'll rattle through these games in order, starting with Saturday, 4:30 Eastern start. Chargers at Texans. The Chargers are 3-point favorites. I This is a weird one because it's one of those games where it's like someone's gonna win and then probably promptly lose in the next round.
So, did you see the stat about the Texans and this game that
Oh
was
no,
circulating over the last day?
I did not. I'm scared though.
Every single time the Houston Texans have appeared in the wild card round, they have been the 4:30 on Saturday game, which I think
Oh,
is now up to like 7 times they've been in this time slot.
that is such a random niche stat.
It is very, very funny, but I don't know. This game feels to me a little generous to have Houston only +3 in this game. Like, I was not impressed by the Texans at all in the second half of the season. They really went downhill. They got smoked by the Ravens, which obviously the Ravens are good, but they lost to Tennessee in November. They lost to the Jets back in October. The second half of the year for Houston really didn't inspire much confidence in me, and I don't think the Chargers are a great team. But I just look at Houston's offense, the way Stroud's been struggling, down 2 of their 3 receivers. Just don't really see them putting many points on the board against the Chargers defense, and I think the Chargers should be able to get enough offensively to be able to win this game.
Yeah, look, the Texans' only chance is if Stroud reverts back to his rookie year form. If he does that, they have a good chance. The Nico and Stroud connection is very solid, so lean on that. Aside from that, if Stroud looks like the mediocre version of himself he's been this season, Chargers are probably going to win by at least a touchdown. Like this is the Chargers are a well coached group, and if Stroud isn't on top of his game, the Chargers will make him pay for it. Like that's the long and short of it. Like I just don't see a world where the Texans can win without Stroud having a fantastic game.
It's hard to see.
Now, moving on, Steelers at Ravens. Ravens are -10 in this one. Steelers, they are just on a devastating losing streak right now. They lost to the Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, and most recently to the Bengals. The vibes are very bad, and it's hard to see a world where like similarly to the Texans, it's hard to see a world where this happens.
Well, the world where it happens is that the Steelers' defense has always, for the most part, been tricky for the Ravens. They've had a bugaboo
True.
here. They didn't when they played a few weeks ago, but there's always a time for it. This, to me, is one of those games where the Ravens have so much more on the line than the Steelers do. Like, the Steelers, I think, can be loose going into this game. They're on a 4-game losing streak. They need to pull themselves together. No one believes in them. No one's going to particularly be, you know, furious if they lose this game. I think it'll make sense given the caliber of the two teams in question here. It's all about the Ravens to me. Like if if Lamar Jackson loses at home to the Steelers in a season where he'll probably win MVP for a third time, after the way his two previous MVP seasons ended in the playoffs, it will destroy his entire legacy until he's got to have a good game in this one. We'll just put it that way.
The universe where Lamar has just an absolute turd of a game, loses, and Josh Allen plays the game of his life for the next 3 weeks and gets to a Super Bowl, and then Lamar is the MVP. Like the NFL world would collectively melt down if that happens. But look, the Steelers defense is capable of doing great things, and they are capable of doing the funniest thing if they are able to stifle this offense again.
I will be cheering for it. I'll just put it that way.
Now, Sunday, the 1 o'clock slot, Broncos at Bills. Bills are 8.5-point favorites. This is so here's the on paper, right? You look at it, Bills, they should crush this. This is going to be a test for the Bills in terms of how ready for playoff football they are. And what I really mean by that is their defensive front ready for playoff football? Because the Broncos, they are far from a perfect team, but they have a good offensive line and they are willing to run the ball. So we saw a few years ago, the Bengals came into Buffalo and just slaughtered the Bills, primarily due to their running game. The Broncos' path to victory in this one is win the turnover battle, establish the run, and just make it as close as possible and make it a 50-50 finish here. Like, I don't know how likely of an outcome that is, but that is the matchup.
Yeah, there's a path for the Broncos, but I just don't really see it. Personally, I just it feels like this is going to be a lights are too bright moment for Denver. I mean, you're going on the road in Buffalo. First playoff appearance in a long time. Not many players on this team have played in the playoffs against a team in Buffalo that has played in the playoffs a lot. And again, there's a path, but this is the game I think I'm the most confident about one team winning, and Buffalo's side.
I think for me, it's more going to be an indicator of how the Ravens and Bills game would go if they both win and they match up in 2 weeks. Because if the Broncos come out and put up 150 rushing yards in this game, the Ravens are going to smoke them on the ground. So the Bills have to come out and just really show that they aren't going to get bullied in the trenches. Because again, Broncos, good offensive line. So that's the test for me. I do lean. I think it's going to be closer than people think, but in those 5 to 6 high leverage plays, the Bills are just going to show. Like Josh Allen will make a crazy play on a 3rd and 13 to extend a drive or something. Like at the end of the day, the Bills are just the more talented team, and in those high leverage plays, their talent will win out. So I think it'll be a one score, like a touchdown, like a 1-score game. I think similar to. You think the Lions and Bucks divisional round game from last year? I think it could follow a script similar to that, where it's pretty close the whole way, but then one team breaks away at the end. But yeah, hard to pick against the Bills in that matchup. Moving on, in the 4:30 slot, Packers and Eagles. Now, it should be noted, Jalen Hurts is still in concussion protocol at the time of recording this. And whether or not he plays will have a massive impact on this game. But as it
Yeah,
stands right now, assuming he plays, how are we feeling?
Jalen Hurts' availability is the whole game to me. If he plays, then I think the Eagles are in pretty darn good shape in this game. Just personally speaking, I was surprised at the 4.5 spread. It feels pretty generous to the Packers to me, but I don't know. We'll see. When they played back in week 1, it was a really close game, so I understand how you get there, but I think the Eagles' defense has improved a ton since then. And in the meantime, I don't really know if the Packers are a better team. I think honestly they're a worse team than they were in week 1. They have trended in a weird direction over the course of the year. Also, Jordan Love he's going to play, but he didn't finish that previous game. Christian Watson's now out with an ACL injury. I don't know. I don't see the Packers defense being able to stop Philly a ton if Hurts plays. And I think the Eagles defense has improved enough that they'll be able to get enough stops to win the game if Hurts plays. If Hurts doesn't play, then Green Bay should probably win the game. I know Kenny Pickett played well against Washington, but they should win in that circumstance.
I think no matter what, this is going to be a wacky game because the Packers are a wacky team, and Jordan Love, if he's supposed to do good, he plays bad. If he's supposed to be bad, he plays good. It's kind of this weird dichotomy, but no one is giving the Packers a chance, so that means they'll probably do a lot better than people are expecting. I do think the Eagles are just too good of a team to lose this one. And I think, quite frankly, the Eagles are too good of a team to not end up in the NFC Championship. But again, we'll see if their quarterback is healthy enough to get there. Now, the Sunday night's game here in the 8:15 slot, Commanders at Buccaneers, in what might be the most interest out. The NFC matchups are all amazing. I got to say that. But Commanders at Buccaneers, they played back in week 1, I believe, in Jaden Daniels' debut. It's been a long time since then, and Jaden Daniels looks a lot better than he did in week 1. I'll just say that. But Baker Mayfield is also playing like a top 5 QB in the league over the last several weeks. So how are we feeling about Commanders and Bucks?
Yeah, I like that all of these NFC matchups are rematches, including obviously Rams Vikings as well. And it's interesting that this is a week 1 rematch like the Eagles Packers game. A lot has changed since then. I also find this spread interesting at Bucks -3, basically saying these two teams are even on a neutral field, which I don't necessarily think is crazy. But it's two teams that have really good offenses and some questionable defenses. The Bucks defense hasn't played super well this season. They were better in the back half of the year, but they played weaker teams. You go back to earlier in the season, they gave up 36 and 31 to the Falcons. They gave up 41 to the Ravens, 30 to the Chiefs. So I expect this to be a high-scoring game. Washington obviously has got some major issues on defense. Their corner position in particular feels like a major concern coming into this game, facing Mike Evans, facing Chris Godwin, facing the weapons that the Bucks have. I kind of go back and forth on who I think is going to win this game. It honestly wouldn't stun me if the Commanders won. If Jaden Daniels has one more trick and they pull it out late in the game, I will be cheering for the Commanders. Obviously, I think if they win and the Packers lose, then the Lions play the Commanders, which would be, in my opinion, probably the most preferable first round matchup or divisional round matchup. That is. So that's my rooting interest, but. This should be a fun game. High scoring is my guess.
It's two things. One, Chris Godwin is out for the year. Second of all, the Commanders made a midseason trade for the Mike Evans killer.
That is correct. Yep.
In Marshawn Lattimore. If there was I'm just saying, if there was a pathway to winning, it makes sense that Lattimore comes over from the Saints and who has given Evans problems for years. He knows how to cover Mike Evans. He's going to travel with him all day. Just saying, there is a pathway to slowing down the Bucks offense. Jalen McMillan has had a pretty good season, especially down the stretch. Baker Mayfield is obviously playing incredible. Bucky Irving, what a revelation he's been for the Bucks offense as well. So, like you said, it probably will be high scoring, but Jaden Daniels, he just is so randomly capable of producing these memorable moments at the end of games. And if it's a one score game late in the fourth quarter, I know who I'd put my money on based on what's happened this season. So, like
I,
you said,
yeah,
I'd probably lean on wanting the Commanders in the divisional round just because I don't want the Rams and I don't really want the Vikings again because you beat them twice. It's hard to beat a team three times in one season. So, go Commanders, I guess. I don't know. We'll see.
yeah.
Uh,
I that's the concern for me about the Vikings and the Packers is just having to
yeah.
play them a third time. So I'd prefer to see someone new, and that's why I'll be cheering for the Rams as well over the Vikings.
And speaking of which, the Minnesota Vikings 14-0 against everyone in the league except the Rams and Lions. And now there's a chance to make that 0-4. The Rams, after a massive upset win over the Bills a month ago, three uninspiring games and where they kind of struggled offensively. They rest their starters in week 18, which allows them to slide down below the Bucks to face the Vikings. How we're obviously cheering for the Rams in this situation. So how confident are you that Matthew Stafford and his band of merry men can get it done?
I'm not confident, but I certainly think they can. We saw them do it already. We talked about ad nauseum the advantages that more veteran quarterbacks have against the Vikings, and their closest games were, I mean, against Kyler Murray, where they survived against a more experienced quarterback. They were close against Geno and the Seahawks. So I think there's definitely a pathway here. Like the way to beat the Vikings is to have your quarterback be able to diagnose weird blitzes and be willing to stand in and sling it right before he gets walloped. And that is Matthew Stafford's whole thing.
He's had lots of
So,
practice.
yeah, so I think he will. I think they'll put up points. Don't get me wrong. I think the Rams will be able to have some major success offensively against the Vikings. I just don't know if their defense will be able to get enough stops. And that's where the Sam Darnold playing in a huge game factor will come into play yet again. And whether the Rams can cover well enough against the Vikings' weapons. I like the potential ability to get pressure on Darnold, particularly from uh, some of their younger linemen who've had nice seasons for the Rams, kind of replenishing that talent pool this year. So we'll see how it goes. But I am very much intrigued. I think this was not a great matchup for the Vikings to get in the playoffs.
Kobe Turner, we just saw Omozurike dominate the Vikings offensive line. Kobe Turner legacy game. Let's go. Like that's the pathway, right? Like you have Verse and Turner on the D line. If those two can have a good game here, the Rams defense will have a chance to hold them in check, and you probably need to hold the Vikings under. I was gonna say 24, definitely under 27 if you want to win. So
Yeah, and not to denigrate the Vikings, but you look over their schedule, they did go 14-3. However, by my count, they were 3-3 against teams in the playoffs. I mean, they really didn't play a super difficult schedule. They beat Giants, Niners, Texans is one, Packers is two, Jets, Colts, Jags, Titans, Bears, Cardinals, Falcons, Bears, Seahawks, Packers three. And then they have their two losses to the Lions and then the loss to the Rams. So this is a much more even playing field in a matchup than a lot of the games the Vikings played.
yeah, and I think if you can add the Seahawks as the only other team that's above 500 that the Vikings beat. Not great, but hey, that's the good thing about the NFL is it doesn't really matter once you get to the playoffs. You just have to play the team in front of you. And look, the game against the Rams came at a bad time for them when they were coming off the Lions loss. The Honolulu flu was still very much a thing at that point, and they played on Thursdays. They had less time to prepare. Cashman was not playing in that game, worth noting. He's very integral to their defensive structure at that linebacker level. So they have the extra day to prepare. They don't play till Monday. So stupid. But we'll see if they learned anything from that Rams loss, and we'll see if they can avoid repeating the history of earlier in the season, losing to the Lions and Rams in back-to-back weeks. Aside from that, do you have any concluding thoughts before we wrap the show?
It's been quite a ride. I am, again, very, very pleased with the regular season, very happy of everything that happened. Hopefully, the playoffs will go well, but if it doesn't, still been a hell of a ride, and I'm glad that we get a stress-free wildcard week, and we'll see what happens next week.
Yeah, well, I've never been happier to not watch Lions football on Wildcard Weekend. I gotta say that. So that's gonna be it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're on a podcasting platform, make sure you follow the show and leave us a review. If you're on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. Tell us how you feel about the show. You can find us on Twitter at Payne and Drain. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. That is going to be it for this. We'll see you guys next week to recap Wildcard Weekend and preview the divisional round. And we'll see who the Lions will end up playing. So enjoy the playoffs, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.